Hi everybody, today we are going to learn about multiplying mixed numbers. Before we start, there's some really important fraction vocabulary that we need to take care of. First is our fractions, and the number on top of your fraction is called the numerator. It tells us how many equal parts we have in our fraction. The bottom number is called the denominator, and that tells us the total number of equal parts we have in our fraction. For example, if you have a pie of pizza and you cut that pie into 5 equal pieces, the numerator would tell you you ate 2 of the 5 pieces. The denominator would tell you the pizza pie was cut into 5 total pieces before anyone ate it. Improper fractions. These are fractions in which the numerator is greater or larger than the denominator. In the example here, 7 halves. 7 is larger than 2. Therefore, it is an improper fraction. Mixed numbers. Mixed numbers are when there is a whole number and a fraction in one. It tells you an amount given as a whole number and then just a piece. For example, in the picture, you can see there is 1 whole box shaded in. That represents our whole number. Here is our mixed number. Finally, we are looking at mixed numbers as well. Mixed numbers is a whole number and a fraction put together. So this is the amount given as a whole number and a fraction. Therefore, if you look at this slide right here, you'll see that you have a whole piece of the square plus 3 pieces out of 4 shaded in blue to represent 1 3/4. All right, now let's look at converting or changing mixed numbers to improper fractions. I like to use the strategy making your mixed number mad. And how you do this is through 3 steps. First, mad, the M stands for multiplying your whole number times your denominator. So in our example, we would be multiplying 3 times the 5. Which would give us 15. Then I add the product, the answer I got in step 1, plus my numerator. And that would give me 17. My final step in the process is keep the denominator the same, which means my denominator stays 5. And then I just put the answer I got during my step 2 into my numerator. So my answer would be 17/5. All right. Now let's practice converting or changing mixed numbers to improper fractions. To start off, we will be looking at 4 2/3. And the first step in the mad strategy is to multiply the whole number by the denominator. What are my whole number and what are my denominator? Well, let's first rewrite this problem. 4 2/3. And I will highlight. I know my whole number is 4 and my denominator is 3. So I'm going to multiply the 4 times the 3, and that will give me 12. My next step in the math strategy is to add the product or the answer that I got from step 1 to my numerator. And I know that the answer or the product I got from step 1 was 12, and I know my numerator is the 2. So I know I have to add the 2 plus the 12. And that will give me 14. My final step in the process is to keep my denominator the same. What that means is I need to bring my 3 all the way over to make the denominator of my answer a 3. So 4 2/3 turns into 14/3. Now it's your turn to try this. First, I will start by rewriting the problem. Step 1, multiply the whole number by the denominator. What is my whole number? And what is my denominator? Take a second to see if you can identify those. Great, the whole number is 2, and the denominator is 4. Now, what do I do next? You're right, I multiply them together, and I get 2 times 4, which is 8. All right, now what's my next step? That's right, you need to identify your numerator, because now you're going to add the answer you got in step 1, or the product you got from step 1, to your numerator. Have you figured out what the numerator is? That's right, it's 3. So I have to add 3 plus 8, and that will give me 11. What is my final step in the process? That's right. Did you say to bring over the denominator? Yeah, I just bring over my 4. So 2 3/4 turns into the improper fraction 11/4. Now let's practice the multiplication step of multiplying mixed numbers. All right, when multiplying fractions, there are 3 steps. First, you must multiply the numerator by the numerator. Then you multiply the denominator by the denominator. And then, if needed, you simplify. Let's look at our example. 1/2 times 1/3. I am going to rewrite it so I can organize my problem. Now, my first step in the problem says I need to multiply the numerator by the numerator. That just means I have to multiply my numerator in my 1 fraction times my numerator in my 2nd fraction. And that will equal 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. The second step is to multiply the denominators together. And all that says is that I have to multiply the denominator in my 1st fraction times the denominator in my 2nd fraction. That means here I have to multiply the 2 times the 3, which will give me 6. The final step in the process is to simplify as needed. However, in this problem, I have a unit fraction, 1/6. That means that it is as simplified as it can be. Let's try another. Here is 2/3 times 2/5. First, I will rewrite the problem. 2/3 times 2/5. Now, step 1. Multiply the numerators together. What 2 numbers am I going to multiply together here? That's right. Did you say 2 times 2? That's right. So 2 times 2 is 4. The second step in this process is to multiply my denominators together. What two numbers am I going to multiply together now? Did you say the 3 and the 5? That's right. So my new denominator is going to be 15. And my last step is to simplify if needed. And my answer is 4/15. And that is as simplified as that answer can get. Now, let's try practicing using both strategies, using mixed numbers. So here we have 4 and 1/3 times 3 and 1/4. So to start, I need to change my mixed numbers into improper fractions. Now I'm going to use my math strategy again. Step 1 says to multiply the whole number by the denominator. So I'm going to do 4 times 3, and that gives me 12. Step 2 tells me to add the product of my answer to the numerator. And I know that means I have to add the 1 plus the 12. And that will give me 13. My last step is to take my denominator and keep it the same. So I really just have to carry it over. So I'm going to just drag this 3 over here to give me 13/3. And now I'm going to put it right here. 13/3. And then I'm going to repeat the step with 3 and 1/4. First, I'm going to write down 3 and 1/4. Then I'm going to go to step 1, multiply my whole number by my denominator. 3 times 4 gives me 12. Step 2, add the product, or my answer, to my numerator. And I know that means I have to add my 1 and the 12. And that gives me 13. And then my final step is to take my denominator and bring it over because it stays the same. So I have 13/4. And now I can write that into my problem. And now I'm ready for the multiplying step. And the step 1 in that process is to multiply the number by the numerator. So that means I multiply my 13 times my 13. I don't have my 13s memorized, so I might have to solve this differently. Today I'm going to use the area model method because it's a little bit faster for me. And I'm just going to turn my 13 times my 13 into expanded form. So 13 turns to 10 and 3, 10 and 3. And I know 10 times 10 equals 100. 10 times 3 equals 30. 10 times 3 equals 30. And 3 times 3 equals 9. And now I just have to add those together. 100 plus 30 plus 30 plus 9. 9, 6, 1. And now I know that 13 times 13 equals 169. Then I am ready to move on to my second step, which tells me I must multiply my denominators together. And my denominators here are 3 and 4. And I know that 3 times 4 equals 12. So my answer here is 169 twelfths. However, this one will require me to simplify. And so that is my last step of multiplying fractions. And how I am going to do that is just divide. So I will write my division problem of 12 divided by 169. And I will use my division strategy of does McDonald's sell burgers raw? The first step in that is how many times can 12 go into 1? It can't. So I'm just going to put a 0, and that tells me I have to look at both numbers, the 1 and the 6. And I know 12 can go into 6 one time. So I'm done with division. Then I multiply 1 times 12, and that gives me 12. I then move on to subtraction. And 16 minus 12 equals 4. I'm then ready for the bring down step, which is 9. And I then look and see, do I repeat or remainder? And I know 49 is bigger than my divisor, so I must repeat all the steps over. And I have to decide how many times can 12 go into 49. I'll give you a moment to figure that out and see if you can solve it. That's right, it can go into it 4 times. And that means that 12 times 4 is 48. And now I'm ready to subtract. And 49 minus 48 equals 1. And now I'm ready for my new fraction. My new fraction is 14 and 1/12. And I can write that over here. When dividing, I know how to set up my new fraction because my whole number will always be found at the top of my answer. My numerator is represented by my remainder, and my denominator is the divisor I started with. So the final answer here is 14 and 1/12. Let's do another. I'm going to let you walk me through the steps of this one. The first thing we need to do is change any mixed numbers to improper fractions. And we have 3 and 4/5 and 3 and 2/3. Let's start with 3 and 4/5. What do I do first? Did you say multiply the whole number by the denominator? You're right. I multiply the 3 times the 5, and that gives me 15. Now what do I do? Did you say to add the product you got from answer 1 to your numerator? That's right. So I know I need to add 4 plus 15, and that gives me 19. What is my final step in the process? That's right, to keep the denominator the same. Therefore, I just have to bring over my 5. So my improper fraction, and now I'm going to write that so I know what 3 and 4/5 is 19/5. And now I need to do 3 and 2/3. Okay, what do I do first? That's right, multiply 3 times my 3, which gives me 9. Now what? That's right, add the 2 plus the 9. What is the final step? You're right, just bring over the denominator. So my answer becomes 11/3. And now I can write that into my problem and move on to the multiplication step. And again, I have big numbers, so I'm going to use the area model I learned earlier in the week. To solve for 19 times 11, I am going to use the area model and partial product method. To do this, I'm going to write down 19 times 11 and draw my box, so I'm ready to go. The first step in using this method is breaking my numbers into smaller pieces to make them easier to work with. And I will do this by using expanded form. So I know 19 in expanded form breaks into 2 numbers. So I will break my box into 2 pieces and put 10 on one side and 9 on the other, because 10 plus 9 equals 19. I then will break 11 into expanded form. And the expanded form of 11 is 10 and 1. So I will again have to break the box into another 2 pieces, labeling one piece 10 and one piece 1. Now I can begin to solve. And what I have to do is write the multiplication problems for each of these boxes. I do that by looking at what's on the top and what is on the side. And I know that my first box will have to be 10 times 10. I then look at my next box, and I know 9 is on top and 10 is on the side. So I will break it into 10 times 9. I then go down to my next box, and I know 10 is on top and 1 is on the side, which means I have to do 10 times 1. And my final box, I have 9 on top, 1 on the side, so my multiplication problem is 9 times 1. And now I solve for each of those. 10 times 10 is 100. 10 times 9 is 90. 10 times 1 is 10, and 9 times 1 is 9. The next step is to add all of these together. And so what that means is I take each of my products that I have found in the boxes and add them up in my partial product. 100 plus 90 plus 10 plus 9. And that equals 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 9. 9 plus 1 is 10. And 1 plus 1 is 2. I now know my numerator will be 209. And now I just multiply my denominator. And I know 5 times 3 is 15. So my answer is 209/15. Now I do still have to simplify. Now to simplify this, I will need to divide. To divide, I will be doing 209 divided by 15. And I will continue to use my does McDonald's sell burgers raw strategy. And to start, I'm going to look at 15 and 20. And 15 can go into 20 one time. And that's my division step. I will multiply. 15 times 1 is 15. Then I will subtract 20 minus 15, which will give me 5. I will then bring down the 9 to make 59, and I know I must repeat my steps one more time. I now have to figure out how many times 15 can go into 59. And I know that is 3 times. 3 times 15 equals 45. And when I subtract those, I get 14. There is nothing to bring down, and I know that that is my remainder because 14 is less than my divisor. And now I know that my whole number is going to be 13, my numerator is going to be 14, and my denominator is going to be 15. And now I know my answer will be 13 and 14/15. Here is another practice. How do I change 1 1/2 to an improper fraction? Did you say to multiply the whole number and the denominator? Right. So I multiply my 1 times my 2. And that gives me a 2. Now what do I do? That's right. I add my answer from step 1 to my numerator. And 1 plus 2 equals 3. What is the final step? That's right, bring over the denominator. So my improper fraction is 3/2. Now let's do the same thing for 3 1/5. What do I do first? Did you say 3 times 5? That's right. And 3 times 5 equals 15. What is my next step? Did you say 1 plus 15? I have to add my numerator to the product I just got in step 1. That's right, 16. And what is the final step? Did you say to bring over our denominator? You're right. So my new fraction is 16/5. And now I can go on to multiplying the fractions. So what do I multiply first? Did you say my numerators? If so, you're right. And 16 is a big numerator, so I'm going to use my area model. Now you told me I have to multiply 16 times 3. 3 is already a whole number that is just a single digit, so I can just put that on the side. But 16 I will have to break up into numbers easier to work with. And so I'm going to use expanded form. And I am going to break those numbers up into 10 and 6. And now I can multiply. 10 times 3 equals 30. 6 times 3 equals 18. And now I can add those together. 8, 4. So my new numerator is 48. What is my next step? Did you say multiply my denominators together? You're right. Now I multiply the 2 and the 5 together, and that gives me 10. What is my final step? Did you say to simplify? You're right. And for this, I'm going to have to divide because I currently have an improper fraction. my first step is dividing. Can 10 go into 4? No, it can't. So that means I have to look at the first two numbers in my dividend. And I know 10 can go into 48 4 times. My next step is to multiply. 4 times 10, and that gives me 40. My next step is to subtract. 48 minus 40, and that gives me 8. There are no numbers to bring down, so I'm done with that step. And now you have to decide, repeat or remainder. And I know that this is a remainder because 8 is smaller than my divisor. So my new answer, my new fraction is 4 8/10. Good luck, and you need to look back, go ahead and do so.